All right, let's jump right in with a pretty big question. Have you ever wondered if the very way you think, how you tackle problems, is somehow hardwired by your culture? It's a huge idea, right? Well, today we're going to dig into a fascinating study tried to get to the bottom of it.
So really think about it for a second. How do you tackle a challenge? I mean, anything from a tough project at work to, just trying to build that new piece of furniture. Is your go-to method shaped by your cultural roots? It kind of feels like it could be true for some people, but what actually happens when you put that idea under a scientific microscope?
And look, this wasn't just some abstract academic puzzle they were trying to solve for fun. Back in the 90s, workplaces were becoming way more global, way more diverse. So for businesses, figuring out what made their teams tick, well, that wasn't just a nice to have. It was seen as absolutely critical for good communication, for innovation, and hey, for just succeeding in this newly connected world.
Okay, so we know the why behind the research, but that brings up a really tough question. How in the world do you even begin to measure something as personal and, abstract as a thinking style?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Luckily, the researchers here didn't have to invent something from scratch. They actually used a framework that was already out there, one that sorts problem-solving into 4 pretty distinct styles. So let's break them down one by one.
Okay, first up is what they call experiencing. This is your classic hands-on problem solver. The person who just wants to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and figure things out by doing. They learn by getting right in there and wrestling with the problem directly. Then we have ideation, and this one is pure brainstorming. The whole goal is just to create a massive flood of ideas. Good ones, bad ones, totally wild ones. It doesn't matter. The key is no judgment allowed. You're just exploring every single possibility before you even think about narrowing things down. All right, style number 3 is thinking. This is your analyst. This is the person who takes a step back from the chaos to build a logical model of the problem. It's almost like an architect drawing up a detailed blueprint. They're all about using data and reason to figure out the hidden structure of what's going on. And last but not least, we've got evaluation. Think of this as the reality check. This is the stage where you take all those brainstormed ideas from the ideation phase, you apply some serious critical judgment, and you figure out, okay, which one of these is actually going to work in the real world?
So, with those 4 styles in their toolkit, let's see how the researchers actually put this whole theory to the test down in Orlando, Florida.
So their method was pretty straightforward. They mailed out 461 surveys. Each survey was designed to figure out a person's preferred style among those 4 we just talked about. And they sent them out to a real mix of people. Some went to folks in apartment complexes, and others went to college students.
In the end, they got 97 completed surveys back. That's a 21% response rate. And that data set, while not huge, was the key. This was what they were going to use to try and answer that massive question about culture and how we think.
Okay, this is it. The moment of truth. The data is all in, it's all been sorted by ethnic group and by problem-solving style. So, what did the numbers actually show?
So, after all that work, did they finally find it? Did the data show a clear, statistically significant link between someone's ethnicity and their preferred problem-solving style?
The answer, in a single, unambiguous word, was no. Now hold on. If you look at this table of average scores, you might say, wait, the numbers are a little different. And you'd be right, they are. But, and this is the really crucial part, that's where statistics comes into play. The researchers ran a test to figure out if those little differences were actually meaningful or if they were just the kind of random noise you'd expect to see by chance. And the results were super clear. It was just noise. The differences were not statistically significant at all.
And that led them to their final verdict. And I'm going to quote directly from their paper here. They concluded that no relationships exist between culture/ethnicity and problem-solving ability. Now, in the world of science, that is a really powerful statement. It basically means their starting hypothesis, the idea that a link might be there, just wasn't backed up by the data they collected. At all. So, case closed, right? Myth busted? Well, it's a little more nuanced than that.
I think the biggest takeaway is that this research pushed back hard against a really common, and let's be honest, a pretty lazy stereotype. It gave us actual data that says, hey, you can't just predict how someone thinks by looking at their ethnic background. The way our brains work is just so much more complex than that.
But And this is super important. The researchers themselves were the first to point out their study's limitations. I mean, the total sample size was pretty small. Some of the individual cultural groups were tiny, with just a few people. And it was all focused on one specific area, Central Florida. So we shouldn't see this as the final definitive word on the subject. Instead, think of it as one really important piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
And that kind of leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to chew on. If this study suggests it's not just our cultural background, then what does shape your unique problem-solving style? Is it your education, your personality, the jobs you've had, or the specific challenges you've overcome in your life? Maybe the real answer is that every single one of us is a complex mix of all those things, and we're way too unique to ever fit neatly into one simple box.